The Loyalist forces met them at the edge of the mountains. Commander Thyrix, who had served under Saleth's predecessor and remained faithful to the royal bloodline, led a column of soldiers through the rocky passes to find them. When he saw the queen, battered and exhausted but alive, he dropped to his knees. "Your Majesty, we feared the worst. Rise, Commander. There is no time for ceremony." Saleth gestured to the humans behind her. "These people saved my life. They need medical attention immediately." Daniel was barely conscious. The wound in his leg had become infected during their journey, and fever had taken hold. Holloway and Rias carried him between them, while Brooks limped alongside, refusing help despite his own injuries. The Loyalist medics took over. Saleth watched as Daniel was carried into a field hospital, his face pale and damp with sweat. She wanted to follow him, to stay by his side, but she was still queen. She had duties. The war lasted 3 weeks. Saleth led her forces personally, riding with the frontline commanders as they pushed the rebels back toward the capital. It was not the behavior expected of a Velthari queen. Queens gave orders from palaces. They did not march through mud and sleep in tents and share meals with common soldiers. But Saleth did all of these things, and her people loved her for it. The rebels had expected the Loyalists to crumble without central leadership. Instead, they found an army united behind a queen who had survived assassination, escaped through forgotten tunnels, and fought her way to freedom with alien allies at her side. The story spread across the planet, and then across the Empire. Citizens who had been uncertain which side to support began declaring for the queen. General Varath made his last stand in the capital. The fighting was fierce, but the outcome was never in doubt. His generals surrendered one by one as their forces were overwhelmed. In the end, Varath himself was captured trying to flee. Through the same tunnels Saleth had used to escape, she ordered him brought. Before her in chains. "You should have killed me when you had the chance," she told him. "You were weak," he spat. "You still are. A queen who cares about the lower castes. A queen who forms alliances with humans. You disgrace our ancestors. Our ancestors built an empire on cruelty and fear. I intend to build something better." She turned to her guards. "Take him to await trial. He will answer for his crimes before all the Dominion." The rebellion was over. The reconstruction began. Saleth stood before her council 1 month later, restored to her throne. The hall had been repaired, the blood cleaned away, the banners of the Empire hanging once again from the ancient walls. But everything felt different now. She was different now. "I have announcements to make," she said. "First, the reforms I began before the rebellion will continue, but they will no longer be gradual. The caste system will be dismantled within 1 generation. All Velthari will have equal rights under the law." Murmurs rippled through the council. Some were supportive. Others were clearly uncomfortable. Saleth did not care. "Second, I am establishing a formal alliance with the Earth Coalition. The first such agreement in our history. Humans proved their worth during my darkest hour. They asked for nothing in return for their help. They stayed when leaving would have been easier. We would do well to learn from their example." More murmurs, but no one objected openly. The story of the human soldier who had protected the queen was known throughout the Empire now. To speak against humans would be to speak against a legend. "Third, I am creating a new honor guard. It will be composed of both Velthari and humans, serving together as equals. This guard will protect not just the throne, but the ideals the throne represents. Justice, compassion, the courage to stay when others flee." She paused, looking at the faces before her. Council members, nobles, generals who had remained loyal. They were watching her with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. She had changed the rules of their world, and they were not sure how to respond. I have one more announcement, she said. This one is personal. She gestured to the guards at the door. They opened it, and 4 humans entered the hall. Lieutenant Grace Holloway, wearing a formal dress uniform. Private Kevin Brooks, still walking with a slight limp, but standing tall. Corporal Nina Reyes, the scar on her cheek now a mark of honor. And Sergeant Daniel Cole, leaning slightly on a cane but very much alive. Sergeant Cole, Saleth said, please come forward. Daniel walked to the base of the throne and stopped. He looked uncomfortable, as if he had never expected to be here, standing before an alien queen and her council. You saved my life, Saleth said. You stayed when you had every reason to leave. You asked for nothing in return. You taught me what true loyalty looks like. I was just doing my job, Your Majesty. No, you were doing much more than that. And I would like to offer you a position as my personal guard. A title that carries great prestige in our empire. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. The entire hall watched him, waiting. I'm honored, he said finally. Really, I am. But I'm a soldier, not a bodyguard. My place is with my unit, out there in the galaxy. He glanced at Holloway and the others. They need me. And honestly, I think you'll be fine without me now. Saleth smiled. She had expected this answer. She had hoped for a different one, but she had expected this. Very well. But you will always have a place here, should you ever wish to return. Thank you, Your Majesty. He paused. And thank you for fighting beside us, for not giving up. You're tougher than you look. She laughed. It was not a queenly laugh. It was real and warm and surprised. I learned from the best. Daniel's shuttle departed 2 days later. Saleth watched it rise into the purple sky, carrying him and his unit back to their ship, back to their lives, back to the galaxy that awaited them. She felt a strange sadness as it disappeared from view. A loss she had not expected, but she also felt something else. Purpose, determination, hope. In the years that followed, she rebuilt her empire on new foundations. The caste system fell. Trade with Earth flourished. Velthari and humans worked together on worlds across the sector, building something that neither species could have built alone. Historians would write about this era. They would analyze the political factors, the economic incentives, the strategic alignments. They would debate why the Dominion had changed so dramatically in such a short time. But Saleth knew the truth. It had started with one human soldier who refused to leave her alone. One act of kindness in a burning palace. One choice to stay when running would have been easier. She kept a picture of him in her private chambers. A reminder of what was possible when someone chose compassion over calculation, courage over caution, connection over isolation. Years later, Daniel Cole did return. He had retired from the military and traveled the galaxy. But something always drew him back to Andara Prime. He found the Queen waiting for him at the palace gates, older now but still strong, still glowing soft blue in the evening light. Welcome back, she said. Good to be back, he replied. So, is that guard position still open? She laughed again, real and warm and full of joy. For you? Always. They walked into the palace together, a human and a queen. Friends who had found each other in the worst of times and discovered the best in each other. The galaxy watched and wondered at the strange partnership between Earth and the Dominion. But Saleth understood something that the rest of the galaxy was only beginning to learn. Humans did not help others because it was logical. They did not form bonds because it was strategic. They did it because something inside them could not walk away from someone in need. It was foolish. It was illogical. And it was the most remarkable thing she had ever witnessed. The end. The Rebel Command Center was located in the military district of the capital city, a massive fortress that had been built to defend against external threats. Now it housed the enemies of the throne. Salith knew its layout perfectly. She had visited it many times during her reign, reviewing troops, attending ceremonies, meeting with the generals who would eventually betray her. She and Daniel crouched in the shadows of a destroyed building 2 blocks away. The sun had set hours ago, and the city was dark, except for the harsh lights of rebel patrols. Smoke still rose from several districts where fighting continued between loyalist and rebel forces. "How many guards at the main entrance?" Daniel asked. 12. "Maybe more. And there are checkpoints throughout the building." "What about other ways in?" Salith thought carefully. "There's a service entrance on the eastern side. It leads to the maintenance tunnels beneath the building. Fewer guards, but the tunnels are monitored. Monitored how? Motion sensors. Heat detection. The security system is old, but functional." Daniel was quiet for a moment. She could see him thinking, calculating, planning. His injured shoulder had been rebandaged with fresh supplies they had found in the mining facility, but she knew he was still in pain. He ignored it. "Can you disable the sensors?" he asked. "Possibly. I have override codes that should still work. Vorath may have changed them, but the lower-level systems are often neglected during transitions of power. Then that's our way in." He checked his weapon again. It had become a habit, something he did when he was nervous. "We move fast, stay quiet, and get to the detention level. That's where they'll be keeping my people. And if we encounter resistance, then we deal with it." His eyes were hard. "I'm not leaving without them." They moved through the ruined streets like ghosts. Salith dimmed her bioluminescence as much as her biology allowed, reducing her glow to a faint shimmer. Daniel led the way, using hand signals to communicate when words were too dangerous. She had never worked with a human before, but she found herself understanding his gestures instinctively. The service entrance was guarded by 2 soldiers. Daniel handled them silently, moving with a speed and precision that surprised her. One moment the guards were standing, the next they were on the ground, unconscious. He did not kill them. Why spare them? She whispered. "They're just following orders. The real enemy is upstairs." They entered the maintenance tunnels. Salith found the security panel and entered her codes. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the sensors went dark, one by one, creating a path through the building. It worked. She breathed. "Nice work. Let's move." The tunnels were cramped and dark. Daniel had to crouch to move through them, while Salith's 4 arms brushed against the walls constantly. They climbed through shafts and crawled through ducts until they reached the detention level dot. The door opened onto a stark corridor lined with cells. Most were empty, but at the far end, Salith could see figures huddled together. The captured humans. 3 guards stood watch. Daniel assessed the situation in seconds. "Wait here," he said. Before she could respond, he was moving. The first guard went down before he could raise his weapon. The second turned just in time to receive a blow to the head that dropped him instantly. The third managed to fire once, the plasma bolt scorching the wall beside Daniel. Before being tackled to the ground dot, the noise would attract attention. They had minutes at most. Daniel ran to the cells and began working on the locks. Salith joined him, using her authority codes to override the security system. The doors slid open one by one. Lieutenant Grace Holloway stumbled out first. She was tall for a human, with dark hair pulled back from a bruised face. Her eyes widened when she saw Daniel. "Cole? What the hell are you doing here?" "Rescuing you, obviously." He helped Private Kevin Brooks to his feet. The young soldier was limping badly, one leg wrapped in bloody bandages. "Can you walk?" "I can manage," Brooks said through gritted teeth. Corporal Nina Reyes emerged last. She had a deep cut across her cheek, but her eyes were fierce. "How are we getting out of here?" "Same way we came in." "Through the tunnels. Who's the Valkyrie?" Holloway asked, looking at Salith with suspicion. "Queen Salith. She's with us." "The Queen? The one they're looking for?" "Long story. Move now, questions later." They ran. Alarms began to sound throughout the building, loud and piercing. Rebel soldiers would be converging on their position from all directions. They had maybe 2 minutes before escape became impossible. Salith led the way back through the tunnels. Her knowledge of the building saved them precious seconds at every turn. Behind them, she could hear shouting, boots pounding on metal floors, weapons charging. "Faster," Daniel urged. They burst out of the service entrance into the night air. The streets were no longer empty. Rebel vehicles were moving toward the command center, responding to the alarm. Soldiers were everywhere. "We'll never make it through that," Brooks said, double quotes. "Yes, we will." Daniel pointed to an alley across the street. "Holloway, take point." "Reyes, help Brooks." "Your Majesty, stay with me." They ran again. Daniel fired at a group of soldiers who spotted them, forcing the rebels to take cover. Holloway led them through a maze of alleys and side streets, somehow always finding a path forward. Salith's legs burned with exhaustion, but she did not slow down. She could not slow down. A plasma bolt hit Daniel in the leg. He cried out and stumbled, nearly falling. Salith caught him with 2 of her arms, keeping him upright. "I'm fine," he gasped. "Keep moving." He was not fine. Blood was soaking through his pants, and his face had gone pale. But he kept running, kept fighting, kept refusing to give up. They reached the outer wall of the city. A section had been destroyed during the fighting, creating a gap just wide enough to slip through. On the other side was open ground and darkness and freedom. "Duh," Daniel said to the others. "I'll cover you. Not without you," Holloway replied. "That's an order, Lieutenant. You're not my commanding officer right now. You're my friend. And I don't leave friends behind." Soldiers were closing in from 3 directions. There was no time to argue. Salith did something she had never done before. She picked up a weapon from a fallen soldier, a plasma rifle that felt strange and heavy in her hands. She had never been trained for combat. Queens did not fight. But right now, she was not a queen. She was someone trying to protect the people who had protected her. She fired. The shot went wide, but it forced the approaching soldiers to dive for cover. Daniel stared at her in surprise. "I am a quick learner," she said. "Remember?" They fought together, 4 humans and 1 Valkyrie queen, holding back the rebels long enough for everyone to reach the gap in the wall. Salith fired again and again, learning with each shot, improving her aim. Her hands stopped shaking. Her fear became focus. Finally, they were through. The darkness swallowed them, hiding them from pursuit. They ran until the city was far behind them, until the only sound was their own ragged breathing. Daniel collapsed against a rock, unable to go any further. His leg wound was serious, maybe crippling. But he was alive. They were all alive. Holloway knelt beside him. "You crazy bastard. You rescued an alien queen and then came back for us. Seemed like the right thing to do," Daniel said weakly. Salith looked at the small group of humans. Injured, exhausted, hunted. But they had survived. Against impossible odds, they had survived. She had fired a weapon for the first time in her life tonight. She had fought beside humans. She had done things that no Valkyrie queen had ever done. And somehow, it felt right. "There are loyalist forces in the southern mountains," she said. "Commanders who remain faithful to me. If we can reach them, we can fight back." Holloway looked at her, then at Daniel, then at the distant mountains. "How far?" 20 kilometers. "Maybe more? Can you walk?" Salith straightened her spine. I can walk. The question is whether you can carry him." Holloway smiled grimly. "Lady, we're humans. We can do anything." They began to walk. They found an abandoned mining facility at the edge of the tunnel network. It had been closed for centuries, its equipment rusted and forgotten. But it had walls and a roof, and most importantly, it had distance from the hunters behind them. Daniel collapsed against a broken machine as soon as they entered. His face was pale, and sweat covered his skin. Salith noticed the dark stain spreading across his shoulder for the first time. Blood. Fresh blood. "You are wounded," she said. "It's nothing. Do not lie to me. Show me." He hesitated, then pulled aside his torn uniform. The wound was ugly. A plasma burn from the fighting at the palace, deep enough to see damaged muscle beneath the blackened skin. He had been walking for hours with this injury, never complaining, never slowing down. "This is serious," Salith said. "You need medical attention." "Wow, unless you've got a hospital hidden in those robes, I don't think that's happening." She looked around the facility. Mining operations required safety equipment, medical supplies. There had to be something here. She searched through dusty cabinets and forgotten storage rooms until she found a first aid kit. It was old, but the contents were still sealed. "Sit down," she ordered. "Let me help you. Do you know how to treat human injuries?" "No, but I learned quickly." She opened the kit and examined the contents. Bandages, antiseptic, pain medication. The labels were in Velthory, but medicine was medicine. She cleaned the wound as gently as she could, feeling Daniel tense with pain beneath her hands. "Sorry," she said. "It's fine. Keep going." Her 4 arms worked carefully, 2 holding his shoulders steady while 2 applied bandages. She had never touched a human before. His skin was warm, warmer than Velthory skin. His heartbeat was fast, pulsing beneath her fingers like a small drum. He was so fragile compared to her species, so easily broken. Yet he had survived things that would have killed a Velthory. "You are stronger than you look," she said. "Humans are tougher than people think. We evolved on a death world. Extreme temperatures, dangerous predators, diseases that could wipe out entire populations. We survived all of it. Death world? That's what other species call Earth. They think we're crazy for evolving there." Daniel managed a weak smile. Maybe they're right. Salith finished bandaging his wound and sat back. The work was not perfect, but it would hold. She watched him take slow, careful breaths as the pain medication began to work. "Why did you join the military?" she asked. "Wanted to see the galaxy. Seemed like the fastest way to get off Earth." He laughed softly. "Didn't expect to end up running through underground tunnels with alien royalty. Life rarely goes as planned." "You can say that again." She thought about her own life. She had never expected to be queen. She had been born into a minor noble family, far from the line of succession. But the previous queen had died without heirs, and the selection council had chosen Salith for reasons she still did not fully understand. They said she had empathy. They said she cared about the common people. They thought that would make her a good ruler. Instead, it had made her a target. "When I was young," she said, "I spent time among the lower castes. I wanted to understand their lives. I saw how they suffered under the old laws. Children working in factories. Families separated because their masters demanded it. People dying of diseases that the upper castes could cure easily." Daniel listened without interrupting. "I swore that if I ever had power, I would change things. I would make the Dominion a place where all Velthory could live with dignity. When I became queen, I thought my chance had finally come." She paused. "But power is complicated. The people who benefit from injustice do not give up their benefits easily." "That's true everywhere," Daniel said. "Earth had the same problems for thousands of years. We're still working on them. How do you keep fighting?" when the obstacles seem impossible? He thought about the question seriously. I guess because giving up doesn't make things better. It just guarantees nothing changes. As long as you're still fighting, there's a chance. Simple words. Simple logic. But Saleth found comfort in them nonetheless. A sound interrupted their conversation. A broadcast signal coming through the facility's old communication system. Someone had activated the public channels. Saleth moved to the control panel and switched on the receiver. General Varath's face appeared on the screen. He was tall for a Velthari, with dark purple skin and eyes that held no warmth. He stood in what had been her throne room, surrounded by rebel soldiers. "Citizens of the Dominion," he said, "the traitor queen has fled. She abandoned her people and her duties. But she will be found and brought to justice." Saleth felt her stomach tighten. "In the meantime, I have a message for any who might be helping her. We have captured the human diplomatic team that was visiting our world. 3 soldiers who did not evacuate in time." The image changed. 3 humans in torn uniforms, kneeling on the floor with weapons pointed at their heads. 2 women and 1 man. They looked terrified but defiant. If the Queen does not surrender herself within 20 hours, these humans will be executed. Their blood will be on her hands. Daniel made a sound like someone had punched him in the gut. Saleth looked at him and saw horror on his face. "Those are my people," he said. "Lieutenant Grace Holloway, Private Kevin Brooks, Corporal Nina Reyes. They're my unit." The broadcast ended. The screen went dark, but the image of the captured humans remained burned in both their minds. "I'm sorry," Saleth said. "This is my fault. If you had not stayed to help me, you would have escaped with them." "No." Daniel's voice was hard now, filled with determination. "This is Varath's fault. He's the one using innocent people as leverage. What do we do?" Daniel was already checking his weapon, testing his injured shoulder, calculating possibilities. His fear was gone, replaced by something cold and focused. "We rescue them," he said. "And then we make Varath regret ever threatening the people I care about." Saleth watched him prepare. A few minutes ago, he had been pale and weak from blood loss. Now he looked ready to fight an army. She had heard stories about human determination, about their refusal to accept defeat, even when all odds were against them. She was seeing it now, firsthand. "I will help you," she said. "Tell me what you need." Daniel looked at her. For a moment, she saw surprise in his eyes. Then he nodded. "All right. Here's what we're going to do." They began the plan. Outside, the hunt continued. 20 hours was not much time. But Saleth was beginning to understand something about humans. They did not need much time. They just needed a reason to fight Dot, and now Daniel had one. The tunnels stretched endlessly beneath the mountains. Saleth had never walked so far in her life. Queens did not walk. Queens were carried in floating platforms, attended by servants, surrounded by guards. But her platform was destroyed, her servants were scattered, and her only guard was a human who barely reached her shoulder. Daniel moved ahead of her, checking each junction before waving her forward. He had been doing this for hours without rest. His uniform was torn and dirty, and the cut on his forehead had stopped bleeding but left a dark stain across his face. He should have been exhausted. He should have been looking for a way to escape alone. Instead, he kept moving, kept watching, kept protecting. "We should rest," Saleth said. "You are injured. I'm fine." "You are not fine. I can see your hands shaking." Daniel stopped. He looked down at his hands and seemed surprised to find that she was right. He leaned against the tunnel wall and let out a long breath. "Okay," he said. 5 minutes. They sat in the darkness. Saleth's glow cast soft blue shadows on the ancient stone walls. These tunnels had been built by her ancestors thousands of years ago, back when the Velthari had feared invasion from rival kingdoms. They had never been needed. The Velthari had conquered their enemies and united their world and eventually reached the stars. They had become so powerful that they forgot what it meant to be afraid. Salith was remembering now. "Tell me about the coup," Daniel said. "Why did they turn on you?" She considered the question. It was a long story, and she was not sure a human would understand the complexities of Velthari politics. But he had earned the right to know. "My people have a caste system," she began. "It has existed for thousands of years. The upper castes rule. The lower castes serve. It is tradition. It is law. It is the foundation of our society. Sounds unfair. It is. It is. When I became queen, I saw how the lower castes suffered. They had no rights, no property, no voice. I began to change things. Small changes at first. Education for lower caste children. Protection from abuse. The right to own their own homes. And your generals didn't like that. No. They said I was weakening the empire. They said the lower castes would rise up if given power. They said I was betraying our ancestors." Salith paused. The memories were painful. I thought I could convince them. I thought if I moved slowly, carefully, they would see that reform was necessary. I was wrong. Daniel nodded slowly. "So they decided to remove you. General Varath leads the rebellion. He was my most trusted military advisor. I thought he supported my vision. Instead, he was gathering forces against me for years." Her voice grew quiet. "I was a fool." "You weren't a fool," Daniel said. "You were trying to help your people. That's not foolish. That's brave." Salith looked at him. His words were simple, but they carried weight. She had spent weeks doubting herself, wondering if she had pushed too hard, too fast. This human she had just met was telling her that she had done the right thing. "Your species is strange," she said. "I've heard that before." "No, I mean it in a good way. You think differently than other species. You act on instinct and emotion. You make decisions that seem illogical, but somehow work." Daniel laughed softly. "Yeah, that's pretty much humanity in a nutshell." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Daniel checked his weapon and stood up. "Break's over. Let's keep moving." They walked for another hour before they heard the voices. Rebel soldiers, somewhere ahead of them. Daniel pulled Salith into a side passage and pressed a finger to his lips. She understood. Silence. The voices grew louder. 3 soldiers, maybe 4, moving through the tunnels with lights and weapons. They were searching. They knew about the passages. "The queen could not have gone far," one of them said. "She is not built for this. She will tire soon." "General Varath wants her alive," another replied. "He plans to execute her publicly. A message to anyone who supports reform." Salith felt cold. A public execution. Her body displayed for all the Empire to see. A warning to anyone who dared to challenge the old ways. Daniel's hand touched her arm. She looked at him. In the darkness, she could barely see his face, but she could feel his determination. He was not afraid. Or if he was, he did not show it. The soldiers passed their hiding spot without stopping. Their lights swept across the main tunnel, missing the side passage by mere inches. Salith held her breath until they were gone. "Close," Daniel whispered. "Too close." They waited until the voices faded completely before continuing. Daniel chose a different route now, avoiding the main passages and sticking to smaller tunnels that were barely wide enough for Salith to fit through. Her ceremonial robes caught on rough stone and tore. She did not care. Survival mattered more than dignity. Hours passed. Salith lost track of time. Her legs ached. Her forearms hung limp with exhaustion. She had never felt so weak in her life. "I need to stop," she said finally. "I cannot continue." Daniel looked back at her. For a moment, she thought he would push her to keep going. Instead, he nodded and found a small chamber off the main passage. It was dry and quiet, hidden from casual observation. "We'll rest here," he said. "A few hours. Then we push for the exit." Salith lowered herself to the ground. Her body ached in ways she had not known were possible. She watched Daniel check the entrance to their hiding spot before sitting down across from her. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For staying. For helping. You could have left me at any time." Daniel shrugged. It was such a human gesture, casual and dismissive. "I told you already. I wasn't going to leave you alone. But why? I still do not understand. There must be a reason beyond simple kindness." He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft. "When I was a kid, my father left. Just walked out one day and never came back. My mom raised me alone. It was hard. Really hard. But she never gave up on me, even when things were bad. She taught me that you don't abandon people who need you, ever, no matter what." Salith absorbed this. A childhood lesson carried across the galaxy, applied to an alien queen he had never met. It seemed impossible. It seemed miraculous. "Your mother sounds like a remarkable person." She was. She died 3 years ago. But I still hear her voice in my head, telling me to do the right thing. Daniel smiled sadly. "I guess that's why I'm here." Outside their hiding place, the tunnels were silent. The rebels were still searching, still hunting. But in this small chamber, in the soft blue glow of her skin, Salith felt something she had not felt in a long time. Connection. She was not alone anymore. And somehow, that made all the difference. The palace of the Velthari Dominion burned against the purple sky of Andar Prime. Smoke rose from the eastern towers where the royal guard had made their last stand. The sound of weapons fire echoed through marble corridors that had stood in peace for 6,000 years. Tonight, that peace was dying. Queen Salith pressed herself against the cold stone wall of her private chambers. Her forearms trembled as she listened to the screams outside her door. Her guards were fighting. Her guards were losing. She could hear their bodies falling one by one, the wet sound of death coming closer with each passing moment. She was 300 years old, young for a Velthari queen. She had inherited the throne only 50 years ago, and she had spent every day since then trying to make her empire better. She had freed the lower castes from forced labor. She had opened trade with species her predecessors had ignored. She had spoken of peace when her generals demanded war. Now, her generals had decided. They no longer needed her. The door to her chambers exploded inward. Salith did not scream. Queens did not scream. She stood tall on her 2 powerful legs, her bioluminescent skin glowing soft blue in the darkness. And she faced the soldiers who came to kill her. But they were not rebel soldiers. A human stumbled through the smoking doorway. He was small by Velthari standards, barely reaching her shoulder. His face was covered in dust and blood. He wore the uniform of the Earth Coalition military, the same humans who had arrived 3 days ago to discuss trade agreements. He held a weapon in his hands, and his eyes were wild with fear and adrenaline. Behind him, she could hear rebel soldiers shouting. They were close. The human looked at her. She looked at him. For a moment, neither of them moved. "You're the queen," he said. His voice was rough and tired. "I am," Salith replied. "And you are far from where you should be human. My shuttle left without me. Got separated from my unit during the attack." He glanced back at the door. The shouting was getting louder. "We need to move, now." Salith did not understand. "Why would you help me?" Your people have no alliance with the Dominion. The rebels have already announced that any species protecting me will face consequences. The human stared at her like she had said something strange. Lady, there are people coming to kill you. I'm not going to stand here and watch that happen. Are you coming or not? She had ruled an empire of 12 star systems. She had commanded fleets and signed treaties and spoken before councils of ancient beings. But in that moment, Salith did not know what to do. Her guards were dead. Her advisors had betrayed her. She was alone in a burning palace with enemies at her door, and the only creature offering help was a small human soldier she had never met. "What is your name?" she asked. "Daniel Cole, Sergeant, Earth Coalition Marine Corps." He grabbed her arm with his free hand. His grip was surprisingly strong. "We can do introductions later. Right now, we run." They ran. Daniel led her through corridors she had walked 1,000 times, but everything looked different now. Bodies lay on the marble floors. Velthari bodies. Her people, killed by her people. The civil war she had tried so hard to prevent had come anyway, and it had come for her. "There are tunnels beneath the palace," Salith said as they moved. "Ancient passages from before the current structure was built. My predecessors used them for emergencies. Can you get us there?" "Yes, this way." She took the lead, guiding him through servant passages and forgotten hallways. Her bioluminescent skin was a problem. She glowed in the darkness, a beacon for anyone searching for her. Daniel noticed this too. "Can you turn that off?" he asked. "No, it is part of my biology. I cannot control it." He said a word in his language that she did not recognize but suspected was not polite. "Okay, we work with what we have. Stay behind me." They reached the entrance to the tunnels. It was hidden behind a decorative wall panel that Salith had only seen opened once during her coronation. She pressed her palm against the hidden sensor, and the wall slid aside to reveal a dark passage descending into the earth. "How far do these go?" Daniel asked. "Several kilometers. They emerge outside the city walls." "Good. That's good." He looked back the way they had come. The sounds of pursuit were fading, but they both knew it would not last. "Let's go." The tunnels were cold and dark. Salith's glow provided enough light to see, which was both helpful and dangerous. They moved in silence for a long time, Daniel checking every corner with his weapon raised, Salith following close behind. She studied him as they walked. Humans were strange creatures. They were small and fragile compared to most galactic species. They lived short lives, barely a century if they were lucky. They came from a harsh world that had tried to kill them at every turn, and somehow they had survived and spread across the stars. The Velthari had dismissed humans when they first appeared on the galactic stage. Too young, too weak, too primitive. But here was one of them, bleeding from a cut on his forehead, exhausted and afraid, and he was risking his life for a queen he did not know. "Why are you doing this?" Salith asked. She could not help herself. She needed to understand. Daniel did not slow down. "Doing what?" "Helping me. You owe me nothing. Your government would probably prefer to negotiate with my generals. They want military contracts, expansion rights. The rebels would give them that. I would not. I don't care about politics." "Then why?" He stopped walking. He turned to look at her, and in the soft blue light of her skin, she could see his face clearly for the first time. He was young, even by human standards. His eyes were brown and tired and kind. "Because you needed help," he said. "And I was there. That's it. That's the whole reason." Salith had lived for 3 centuries. She had studied philosophy and history and the nature of sentient beings. She had met hundreds of species and learned their customs and motivations. Everything in the galaxy operated on logic. Alliance, trade, mutual benefit, strategic advantage. No one did anything without reason. The dishuman had just told her that he was risking his life because she needed help, and he was there. She did not know what to say. "Come on," Daniel said. "We have a long way to go." They continued into the darkness. Above them, the palace burned, and the empire she had built began to crumble. But Salith was not alone. A human soldier walked beside her, weapon ready, asking nothing in return. For the first time since the attack began, she felt something she had not expected to feel. Hope.